Minutes from my home and just pop on over to Warren's place. It's great to have you in District 16, so welcome. By the way, thank you, Warren, for hosting us. Okay, so this is my 5th year in the Iowa Senate, and as you've probably been following along in the news, it's been a very brutal legislative session for anyone with a heart, a brain, or compassion for human beings. So that includes me, so I'm glad to be out of there, at least temporarily, after the bludgeoning we took. And it sometimes really did feel like that, personally and professionally, and as a mom and as a grandma, just felt awful, like someone had punched me in the gut. And I felt sorry for the new people this year because they hadn't experienced anything like that yet, and this was a bad year to be a first-year person because so many bad, nasty things happen. So I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Claire. I'm engaged to be married. I will be married September 2nd of this year. I have 2 children who are both in their 30s. I have a granddaughter named Mia, who is the light of my life. She's pretty awesome. She's 6. And the reason I ran for office initially was because Governor Branstad at the time had vetoed a bill, I think it was $56 million, that the legislature had come to an agreement on for public education. The only problem is that as soon as the legislature agreed on it and the session was over, Governor Branstad vetoed it. So in other words, they lied. They lied about it. So I was sitting at my dining room table. It was July 3rd, which is the news dump day, right before the 4th of July. No one's paying attention, right? And someone was looking at me as I was on my computer reading this news, and they go, "Oh God, what now?" And it was, this thing happened, this bad thing happened. So I just decided to run for office at that very moment. I decided I was going to run, and that was in 2015. Waited till my daughter got married a couple months later, and then announced my campaign in October. And that was the year Donald Trump ran for office, 2016. Little did I know what was going to happen and how it was going to happen. I should have gotten a clue because knocking on doors that year was really weird. People were not excited about Hillary Clinton. Even though some people had lots of respect for her and love for her, they just weren't that excited about her. And I also ran into some people who supported Trump who were oddly just totally excited about his inexperience and crude behavior. So I had a gut feeling like about July of 2016 that something was going to go horribly wrong. I tried to ignore it because, I had to campaign. I was on the ballot. I had to get out there and talk to people. So as you all know what happened, it happened. The weird gut feeling came true. It was probably the one of I got over my loss in about 30 seconds once I realized what happened to our country. And, the Republicans were still in charge in Iowa, so there was nothing to be happy about, nothing. And as you all know, it's just gotten worse since then. The Iowa legislature has gotten redder and redder, and the country has gotten, sort of back on track a little bit with Biden, but we're still not where we need to be for human rights, LGBTQ rights, any kind of rights. With the Supreme Court that we have, it's just going to be awfully tough to claw our way back, but we're trying. We are trying. There are people like me who are trying, and I want to reassure you that I think we're going to swing back eventually, and it's going to be okay. The rest of the country already got the message. Republicans don't know how to govern. Iowa still has yet to get that message, and I'm hoping we can get back there. So as you know, our culture and history and belief systems and all these kinds of things are all kind of mixed up together. And over time and over history, these ideas keep popping up in different places. So I want to read you something that I found that I think perfectly describes why our government is so obsessed maybe with religion, or some people in our government are so obsessed with religion. And it really has everything to do with history. And I am speaking to a room of probably way bigger experts than I am on these types of subjects. So I'm going to read this and then kind of go to a different subject. But I thought it was very informative. Our law is not like Melchizedek, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. The law, like everything we do, like everything we say, is a heritage from the past. Sir Francis Bacon long ago said, "The law of England is not taken out of Amadeus de Gaulle, nor the book of Palmerin, but out of the scripture, out of the laws of the Romans and the Grecians." And again he said, "Our laws are as mixed as our language." So as our English language has sprung from Anglo-Saxon, Teutonic, French, Latin, and Greek roots, our English common law, with its unsurpassed power of assimilation, elimination, and expansion, has its origins in old local customs. The civil law, the canon law of the church, the writings of philosophers, and the texts of the scriptures, interwoven with the accumulation of 1,000 years of statutes and judicial decisions. To speak in a parable, it is like the air plant, which grows by the wayside in Bermuda. Even when torn from its native soil, it still keeps on growing, deriving its nutrition from every one of the four winds of heaven, or again, like the banyan tree, its branches, wherever they touch the earth, take fresh root and spring anew. I just thought that was kind of how I feel about our conglomeration of laws and traditions here in Iowa. And the reason why I really do still think we will swing back to a more progressive history, our more progressive history, which we do have here in Iowa. And I'm proud of that. I'm extremely proud of that. And I think you should be too. Is because I think we will eventually have more leaders who understand the value of that progressive history and go back that way. So I want to give you a little bit of hope, because I have a little bit of hope that we will get back to that. Hopefully I'll be alive to see it. I'm 57 now. We'll see if I live that long. Okay, so I want to talk to you a little bit about my own personal journey with religion and faith and lack thereof. I grew up as a Catholic here in Des Moines, Iowa, and was a good Catholic schoolgirl for many years. Went to St. Anthony's, went to Dowling, and my parents, I think, just wanted to have me continue my faith formation, moving from one school to another, and they truly believed that was the best thing for me. My mother used to be a nun, so you can see where she, obviously thought that she wanted me to have a religious education, and my brother and sister too. So that's what I did, because my parents decided that's what I was going to do. I grew up, I joined a church on my own, I became a city or parish council member. I, was a leader. I really enjoyed it, actually. And the priest in my parish wasn't all that bad. He was actually a really nice guy. My kids loved him. And, I just went on. But then something happened. I call it the winter of my discontent. I know that's kind of corny, but that's kind of how I feel about it. And it was right around the time that 9/11 happened. And I started to realize that all these people were fighting all the time. And what was it about? It was all about religion. It was all about religion. And I wanted to just be able to blame it on people I had never met on the other side of the planet. But then I got to thinking, this is happening here too. This is happening right here in the United States. This is happening in our state. We have all these denominations, all these sects, all these, little teeny religions breaking off and starting new ones and creating havoc and excluding people and, in some cases, because of 9/11, killing people. And that's not the first time that's happened. We all know that. So I started to get really disillusioned. And it was a terrible feeling. It really was a terrible feeling. Whew. It's really still tough to talk about, honestly. So I waited a couple years. My kids were in, catechism, I guess is the old word for it. So I waited till that was done because, when they were baptized, I made a promise to bring them up in the faith. So that was my promise, and I was going to keep it. So then the feelings were still there. The worst thing that happened during that time, two things. One was the Boy Scout abuse thing, child abuse thing, and then related to that in some way, in my mind, was the priest abuse scandal in Boston. Do y'all remember that? I watched the movie Spotlight. Just about killed me. It was awful. It was awful. And, it was just hard. It was hard to realize that my faith was caught up with people who could do things like that to little kids. And I couldn't deal with it. And, for the longest time, could you give me my water? For the longest time, I wanted to just think that it was somewhere else and not here. It wasn't in my parish, it wasn't my priest, it wasn't my little church here in Des Moines, but it was really a bigger thing. But I kind of realized as time went on that I really couldn't separate the two. I couldn't. There was no way I could. So I had the hardest talk I've ever had with my mom and dad, who were very devout Catholics and very faithful people. And it probably broke their heart, but I had to do it. And it was hard. But since then, I've come to realize that we all have a role to play in the world. And my role is going to be to separate religion as much as I could out of my life because it wasn't serving me anymore. It wasn't serving me. So I had to get a little selfish for a little while and say, I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I'm sorry, St. Ambrose. I'm sorry, whatever. I can't do this anymore, and I'm not going to. So I kind of went a different way. Then I got elected so I lost that first time I ran, but I ran the next cycle, 2018, and won. So started in the Iowa Senate, January 10th, I think it was 2019, January 10th. And boy, that's a really religious place. So, here's what it's like to be in the Senate. You pray first, every day, and it's usually one of your fellow senators that is praying, and it usually goes something like this. Dear Lord Jesus, help us to discern your ways and do the right thing and be servants to you, blah, blah, blah. And then they introduce awful bills that hurt people. And then they vote yes for them. So it's like cognitive dissonance. You know, it's just like, wow, really? Is that what you're going to do? And they do it day after day. It's just mind-numbing. Shocking and mind-numbing is what it is. So it's hard. Sarah and I sometimes try to bring in other speakers that can either, you know, oh, by the way, we have our first Jewish senator who sits right next to me, and I love it when she gets up and, you know, reads Torah passages and, like, disrupts their whole, like, day and blows their mind and, you know, stuff. It's pretty cool. She used to be a diplomat. She's actually a very cool person. Janice Weiner, you need to meet her. She's really cool. Anyway, so I love her. She's terrific. But occasionally we'll get, you know, like Liz Bennett's in there too, and she's brought in a Wiccan priestess, and a couple of atheists have done prayers and things like that. So we try to shake things up in there, but let me tell you, it is hard. It's really hard to do because they're on to us. They're on to us, you know. By the way, if we don't say a Christian, really Jesus-y prayer in the Senate for the morning prayer, they'll go into their caucus and re-pray. So it's kind of funny, not in a funny ha-ha way, but a funny bizarre way. So I just want to tell you that many of us in the Senate especially realize that not everyone is a, you know, Christian, not everyone is religious, not everyone is, you know, and people think for themselves. That's the main thing. They think for themselves. And we're also very aware that that is not only a trend here in Iowa, but nationwide. You know, there's many people who have no faith whatsoever, their own personal faith, whatever it is, you know, that's much different than the traditional Christian faith, I guess you would call it. I call it cultism, kind of. But that's their, you know, that's their prerogative too. So I think what I've decided is that just like the politics are so wrong right now in our state, eventually people like you and others who are holding different belief systems all together will be able to have a bigger place in the public square, and I cannot wait for that day. I really can't. And I'm sure many of you feel the same way. So that's really all I wanted to say today, but I want to take your questions, and I thank you so much for inviting me here. Anybody? Sir.
I'm a humanist celebrant with the American Humanist Association, and I would like to give an invocation in this coming legislative session based on stripping them of their fake robes. I will start out with their little prayer to Jesus, and I will expose them for the hypocrisy that they're evidencing in what they produce.
You know what? The sad thing about that is they don't let outside people pray anymore. They used to.
Even if they're sponsored, like a minister.
I don't know. They may not. I'll try that. But they may not let you in. That's unfortunate. They've changed the rules since they've figured out how crafty we are about getting people that don't agree with them to talk. So, yes, sir. Go ahead. He was talking about, he wanted to come in and be a minister and say a different prayer than the normal folks usually say, that, like the normal prayers. I'm not saying they're normal, I'm just saying they think they're normal.
So I thought I will take the microphone
sure.
out to you that are asking questions so everybody
idea.
can hear, and then we'll run this thing back and forth in relays.
Great.
Here, so who?
Sir?
Thank you, Senator. I'm curious, on the campaign trail and in your appearances, have you been, or how often have you been, challenged on your religious views?
I can count them on one hand. Hardly ever. No one hardly ever asks me that. There's nothing about my faith on my bio. No one ever asks me any questions about that. It's usually much more policy oriented. People ask me who I voted for president. Like when I was door knocking, when Hillary was running on the same ticket as me, they asked me if I was voting for Hillary. They didn't ask me what my faith was, though. Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering, more of a political question. Did Kim Reynolds really think of all these things herself that she wanted to push through, such as the school choice voucher? Or are there entities that are encouraging her, pushing her to be their representative? Because it's hard for me to imagine that she'd come up with all this on her own.
Kim's not that smart.
So, in answer to your question, no, she didn't think of hardly any of them herself, because they're not Iowa issues. They're not pressing issues here in Iowa. We have pressing issues here in Iowa: affordable child care, affordable housing, things like that. Those are what I would consider to be Iowa issues, and coincidentally, hardly any of those came up this year. We really have very big problems in some of those areas, and we didn't spend any time working on those problems, unfortunately. I think they get a lot of their ideas from Fox News and other sources. They also get a lot of ideas from their think tanks, the Heritage Foundation, things like that. Other governors, Ron DeSantis had a big influence on Kim Reynolds, I think, this year. Betsy DeVos is still looming large. By the way, my first year in the Capitol, I was there on my day off, picking something up, and somebody said, "Betsy DeVos is here, Betsy DeVos is here." I said, "You gotta be kidding me." No. I went downstairs, she was going into the governor's office, I saw her. And that was the day that vouchers were hatched in Iowa. That was the day. She met with only Republicans, and we saw what happened this year. They finally got them passed. So Betsy DeVos came and said, "Here's our new plan. We're going to have vouchers in every state. You're going to be a part of that." And Kim Reynolds said, "Okay." So yeah, crazy. Alan?
Actually, in follow-up to that, a lot of the bills that were introduced in Iowa, not necessarily the final wording, but the introduction of the bills were identical in 20, 30 different states, word for word, including some passages of those bills that were harmful to the pork industry in Iowa, and yet they were introduced even though they were harmful to the pork or the corn industry in Iowa. But the person who introduced them didn't even read those sections of the bills.
That's right. They mostly don't read the bills that they're signing off on and voting for. Yeah.
My name is Dottie. I'm actually one of your constituents in West Des Moines, and that first campaign, mine was one of the doors we knocked on, so we met way back in 2016. There's, you may have heard that Roe v. Wade was recently overturned. And I know both on the internet and real life have had pro-life people say that now they're going to get to work protecting women and the babies that are going to be born because of Roe v. Wade. And I was wondering if your friends across the aisle have hatched any plans to do that. And then I'm also wondering what Dems are doing to make sure that Iowa is still a safe place to have children and to be a woman and live as a young adult. Like I have two young daughters here, and I don't know. I want to make sure it's a safe place for them to be if I stay. So.
Okay, this is going to be I'm going to try and shorten this answer up because there's so many different abortion safe and legal in Iowa, we're gonna try like hell. We're also not gonna see it going to a vote, I don't think, because I think they know they're gonna get beat. That was their original strategy a few years ago. They were trying to get it on the ballot, and it still may be on the ballot, but they're gonna get beat if that happens. So I think they're gonna try and pass a law to make it, probably a 6-week ban, that's what I would guess, because that's what they tried to do before. But in addition to trying to change the law about abortion, they're also bringing in all these other harmful ideas like these pregnancy centers, which really aren't medically based centers at all. They have mostly a religious tone to them. Misinformation, shaming, things like that. And they're using public money now for those awful centers. So, we simply don't have the votes to overturn some of those laws right now, which is why, this is my only political thing I'm going to say all day as far as voting. If you have a Democratic representative like you do, you have two, is Jennifer your state rep?
No,
Mary Madison. Yeah, she's great too. So if you have a Democratic state rep, go 1 or 2 rings out from where you live and start supporting the people that you want to be in office. Brad Zahn's up for election this year, so if you live in Urbandale, and if you live outside of Urbandale, help the Urbandale folks get rid of him because he's one of the most virulently horrible anti-abortion people in the Senate. So we got to get rid of him. Ma'am? most of you live in urban areas? Do most of you already live in districts with Democrats representing you? If you don't, raise your hand. Okay, so first of all, don't vote for Republicans. That's number one tip. And then, like I said, go a ring out from where you live. Support the Democrats where you live, and then go a ring out and support the Democrats in the next suburb out or the next town out. And then run really good candidates. That's another thing. I think we do have lots of good senators and representatives now. So we need to keep doing that, running quality candidates. And then one thing that I need to tell you, this is really depressing, because the Democrats really were kind of dethroned with their caucus process. We're still going to try to have a caucus. It's not going to be the same this year anyway, because Biden is the nominee, and there's just not as much as excitement around the Democrats this year. So money is going to be a huge issue. Usually all these outside campaigns bring bribe money with them. So for example, like DeSantis and Trump are going to be giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Republicans to filter down to their candidates. So when you look at the TV 2 weeks before the election, you're probably going to see 10 times as many ads for Republicans as you will for Democrats, because that's how much more money they have than us. So it's really crucial that you keep your money in Iowa if possible, because we truly do need it the most right now. And I know it's really tempting to give money to whoever is running against Ted Cruz and whoever is running against, people in Georgia or whatever, but really, you should really try your best to keep it here if you can. We are going to be outspent by a lot. It's going to be a lot. So we're not even going to try to keep up with them. We never do. But at least we can do is fight, and we'll need as much as we can get. We still have time?
Yes, plenty of time.
Okay.
Something you said that I want to emphasize, it's about, a lot of people say to me, well, I don't vote Democrat or Republican, I vote for the person. And I think we really need to change your friends and your family's minds that in today's politics, it's important to vote for the Democrat. And no matter how friendly and nice that Republican is, or that school board member who's going to vote conservative on the school board, it's real, it's really important to vote Democrat, because no matter how nice they are, when they're sitting on that board or sitting in Congress, they're going to vote their party line.
Yes.
One of the ways that Republicans are so effective at spreading all these identical bills is the bill mills, ALEC and Project Blitz and what's the new one? The National Association of Christian Lawmakers. I know there's a lady over in the House who's the chair of that. That's right, Iowa. Have you heard any inkling of anything like equivalent on the Democratic side, and would that help with that?
Well, we have, believe it or not, we have very strong policy position making going on at the federal level right now because of the Biden administration. They do a much better job than any other administration that I've ever seen of giving us talking points, help. There are legislative, I guess you call them committees or something, that help legislators like me. Like if I wanted to do a bill, there's a model bill out there for me to get if I need it. It's much more dispersed, and theirs are much more evil than ours, definitely. But it's all about the balance of power. Once you get power in a body like the Senate or the House, that's when all your bills start getting passed. During Joe Biden's first term, I think they passed 400 bills in their first session.
Senator, when you're in the legislative minority, what have you found to be the best way to push back against the opposition, the most effective ways? And then the other question for you is, I mean, I'm not from Iowa, but over the next year you're going to have all these Republican candidates coming through here for the primary. To the people who live here, I'm wondering, like, when they go to town halls or anything like that, what questions should they be asking to get people on the side, or at least stir up something interesting? Because a lot of the questions might be dull, but in terms of church-state separation, in terms of things a lot of us in this room care about, what would you like to see people ask those candidates?
It's a great question. Republicans are really cagey on this because for the last 4-ish years here in Iowa, they've just stopped going. They've stopped going to the town hall meetings. They've stopped being interviewed by the paper. Like, so the Democrats are the only ones who show up to some of these town hall meetings. And then the other ones that do show up, you know, it's like noon on a Friday. So most people can't even go because they're working. So they've really just stopped talking to people, and that is really frightening. But when they do get there, yes, absolutely. You should put a legislative forum Q&A on your website and have all those questions ready for people to print out and bring with them and ask. Because sometimes you can catch them. You can come up to the Capitol and talk to them as well. So that's another way. I think that means I'm done. They cut me off. Ran out of batteries, I think.
We've got lots of batteries. Lots of batteries. That's right.
I'm reminded of Aesop's fable, Wolf in Sheep's Clothing,
Yeah.
when I think about the legislative sessions.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's on. You never know. Bad battery.
Maybe I'm really bad at putting batteries in things here. I paid $25 and all I got was this.
It's not gonna work.
Just a minute.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think would happen if journalists were to temporarily join the Republican Party? And then retain our vote for,
Well, I don't know what's going on. The microphone doesn't want to work anymore. Maybe it's tired. Maybe it wants to take a break. But actually, that brings us up to about the 10 till mark. If you want to say anything else?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
So yeah, we'll take a 10-minute break here. We'll see if we can get our technology to work for us again. So we'll see you back here at about 2 o'clock. I don't understand it.
green goes.
Greens,
11
but then it
turns
just
that off.
drops.
So there's no way all the batteries you put in are dead. Something's
No.
going on here.
Yeah,
And it's just double A's, right?
yeah. So first I thought, okay, the batteries that were down here were bad, so I got fresh out of there. I mean, what?
Wow. And it's already, yeah, I mean, it's not even disconnecting, it's just turning on. It's swapping batteries.